Okay, guys, welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you. I still don't have any followers, guys, so feel free to click and subscribe. Either way, it's not going to stop me from doing the podcast and sharing some valuable information with you guys. So, today I want to talk about pricing and how much money you should be charging to your customers on a ratio based formula that's going to help you one, get better organized, and two, make sure that you're making a profit. So if you want to ensure that you're making a profit, guys, stay tuned. I think this could change your whole system on how you invoice and how do you charge people for your time and your employees' time. So stay tuned. This one is going to be discussing the ratios you should be using for billing, guys. How much should you actually be charging for your employees' time? So stay tuned. Okay, guys, so now I want to talk about something very, very important to your business is one, understanding what things actually cost you when it comes to labor, because this is critical if you want to make a profit, which is what you're going to be there for, right? So keep in mind, this whole podcast is to try to help you focus and learn from some of the mistakes I've made. So when you do take that step of faith, heaven through business, which is what we're promoting, you're actually successful, guys. So these are some of the hard lessons I've learned the hard way, which I want to help you make sure that you don't make the same mistake. So stay tuned. So what I'm talking about now is overhead factor, guys. Overhead factor. And there's a formula for this, and understanding how much you're actually spending on labor and overhead will actually help you determine how much you have to charge and invoice. So think about this as a mathematical solution to why some of you guys are in business for so long and don't have anything to show for it, right? And for those of you guys that are going to go into business, this is very, very important. You want to listen to this formula. You don't want to start a business blindsided. And I'm sure some of you guys that are MBA or business students understand this, but in real practice, guys, a lot of times guys do not stick to the formulas. They don't stick to the code. You have to follow formulas if you want to be successful. It's not something that you are inventing. There's already people that have become successful that you can learn from, such as myself, such as other business owners. You don't have to go in this blind. So let's go. So overhead factor, guys. So let's think of, I'm going to use whole numbers here to realistic numbers because these are numbers that small businesses operate under. But what is overhead factor? So overhead factor. So overhead factor, guys, is essentially your overhead divided by your direct labor ratio. Okay. Now, sounds pretty boring, right? But let me explain. Let me give you a scenario. So let's say your overhead for the year was 450,000. That's your overhead. That includes your rent, utilities, payroll taxes. This is what it costs you to operate, right? Or this is your projected overhead. Let's assume for a minute you have employees, which you're a business owner, you should, or you want to have employees. You don't want to just be paying yourself, right? So your direct labor cost was 300,000, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to take the 450,000 total overhead, you're going to divide it by 300,000, which is your direct labor, and you're going to end up with 1.5, okay? That's going to be your ratio, 1.5. That's very important. That's your overhead factor. Now, let's take $30 an hour, which is a realistic hourly rate for somebody. So $30 an hour. So what does that mean, guys? That means that for every dollar that you paid this employee, you actually spent $1.50. So what you need to do is you need to multiply the $30 times 150, and that means that every hour that you're paying this employee $30, it's actually costing you $45 an hour, guys. So that's the factor, right? Because there's different components to overhead that are not necessarily tangible, right? Sometimes there's overhead time, there's coordination times, there's different factors. So you have to always account for a ratio that allows you to absorb some of those unforeseens and realistically say it's not only costing you $30 an hour to keep this person employed, it's actually costing you $45 an hour. So now you have $45 an hour. How much should you charge for that employee? $50 an hour? $60 an hour? No, you have to now consider using a multiplying factor to that employee's hourly rate. Now, based on what we just discussed, are you going to multiply his hourly rate times a multiplier? No, you're going to actually multiply your overhead factor, which is what it actually costs you. So what you're going to do is, and most companies in corporate America, and the factor is something that will be determined by the specialty. Obviously, the better you are at something, you know, a great defense attorney is going to have a factor that might be 10. They could bill whatever they want, right? In some cases, it doesn't even apply. They have a number that is not matchable by any factor because they're just that good. But if you're a normal operator, you're probably going to use a number of 3. So what that means is you're going to take the $45 that it's costing you and you're going to multiply it times 3, which is going to get you $135. That means that you should be invoicing for that specific employee that you pay $30 an hour. You should be invoicing $135, guys. And I could put money that a lot of you guys are not. You might feel lucky that you're invoicing $100 for that employee, right? Because wow, I'm making $50, but you're really not. And these are bottom line numbers, guys. The ratio, I myself use a 4.5 ratio. But nonetheless, this is how you have to view business, guys. This is how you have to charge. And if you're charging for your time, right? If you're a sole proprietor and you have no employees, you should actually be charging more because you should assume that you would be having to have an employee. So if you're doing the work of 2 people, you should actually be charging for 2 people. If not, you're never going to break free and you're always going to be just an employee of yourself. And that's not a business, right? So this is key, guys. This is very critical to your success. You want to make sure that you understand how you are invoicing billable hours. And in products, now if you're selling a product, it's even easier, right? Because you know the margin on a product. If you're selling a car, or if you're selling a house, or if you're selling anything that is tangible that you could touch, then the product will ultimately have a bottom line of your cost. And you don't necessarily have to use this ratio because you're going off of percentages. It's a little easier to make a profit if you're selling products than if you're essentially selling labor, right? So now that you understand ratios, guys, how are you going to operate a business, and how are you going to justify these prices, right? Because a lot of customers don't want to see that you're charging X amount. They don't understand, right? A lot of people might actually not give you business because they see that, oh, well, why am I paying $135 an hour when he's only paying the employee $30 an hour, right? So this is where you have to get clever, right? So you can't, I've seen design firms do hourly rates not to exceed certain hours. And I don't recommend that, guys, for any contract because it could get tricky, and timekeeping becomes also an issue, right? What I prefer is actual contracts on performance based and bid items, right? So there's more risk because let's just assume for a minute the project takes longer than you expect. You could have punitive damages where you actually either pay the customer back or you become essentially negative on your balance sheets and you're paying more. But that's where you have to also account for these ratios, right? So on a contract labor, if I'm going to pay X subcontractor or X contract employee, because there's even professional subcontractors, right? You have to use the same ratio. Now, on lump sum contract, the ratio is going to be less. It could be a 2% ratio or a 2.5. But nonetheless, if the contract with your subcontractor is costing you $50,000, you need to be charging between $100,000 and $120,000, right? And you are at the end of the day still taking on all of the liability, and that's why they're paying you, guys. If you are the business owner, they're essentially investing and trusting you as the business owner and as the entity that has the great reputation or the credentials, right? So whenever you're doing a contract, you have to use that as leverage. So don't try to justify your prices. Don't try to make people question why you're charging what you're charging. I'm very open about my pricing. I want people to understand what my profit is. I'm not shy about that. It doesn't it doesn't make sense to me how some people try to hide or are embarrassed that they're charging to make a profit. The whole reason you're in business is to make a profit. Keep that in mind. So why hide the fact that you want to make a profit? Why hide the fact that you have to charge at least three times more than what you're paying the employee because you carry all of the overhead costs? You carry all of the liability if something goes wrong. If your employee breaks something, they don't even know who the employee is, right? And I know that most people will say, some customers, not all, but some will say, well, why am I paying for your insurance policy, essentially, right? And the answer is simple. You're paying for a portion of that insurance policy because you want me to do your project. You need my service or my product that I'm offering, and therefore you are gonna pay for some of the cost that I inquire because I'm doing business with you. You're not paying 100% of it, but you're paying a portion of it, right? So this lesson is about knowing how to charge, right? But also understanding that you have the right to make a profit. I can't get that through some people's heads. It's almost like it's not even being humble. It's almost like you want to be a nice guy, or you want to hide the fact that you are making money off of this individual's request. But at the end of the day, that's what business is, guys, is a transactional um, business. It's a transaction. So you pay me money and I'll deliver a service or a product. That's it. We're not here to be friends. We're not here to talk about how your life is going. You know, you could be cordial, and over time in business, you will become close to some customers. But at the end of the day, the day you cannot provide the service that they want, they're just going to not call you anymore. It doesn't matter how your kids are doing. It doesn't matter how good of a nice guy you are. Business is business. So you treat it the same way. Would you work for free, right? Would you stay employed just because you want to be a nice guy? If you worked at McDonald's, would you flip burgers just because you like the burgers? And would you be ashamed of collecting your paycheck? Probably not. I wouldn't. So why are you embarrassed or ashamed to let customers know that you're making a profit? I carry that proud. I want people to understand that I'm doing a business because I want to make money. I want to provide for my family and my friends or whatever I have going on. I want to have nice things, right? So get that mental block away from your mind, guys, and don't be embarrassed to know your, because you already know your worth. So anybody that comes to you and wants a service or a product, they're expecting to pay. They understand that that's how you make a living, right? Now, sure, you don't want to make it brag. You don't want to brag, right? Like I've had some of my employees, right? They pride themselves in like jewelry and all these things. And, sometimes it rubs people the wrong way, and to each its own, you know. But depending on your industry, sometimes they expect you to pull up in a very nice vehicle, right? Sometimes they expect you to have a certain look. So if I'm an interior designer, well, if I'm a customer and I'm hiring an interior designer, I expect that interior designer to look clean and a certain way and have a certain fashion sense. I expect that, right? I don't want somebody that comes in and is not confident and hasn't, doesn't look polished. So there's nothing wrong with wearing nice things, with people seeing you and saying, "Oh, well, that guy looks like, he probably charges good because his fee is probably high because he looks like he, likes nice things." So that's not being cocky. And for some people, it's the opposite, right? I do have some people that are in the flip flops and t-shirts and very plain, and that's their MO. That's what I'm saying. To each its own. But I guess what I'm saying is, don't be embarrassed to be who you are. and project the image you want because you're worried about somebody not giving you business. That's not how business works. People get hired with tattoos, people get hired with piercings, people get hired all kinds of shapes and forms because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is you get the job done, right? If I hire you, if I'm providing a service, I expect you to get the job done. Therefore, I'm expecting you to charge accordingly and I expect you to make a profit. So, understanding these ratios, guys, and understanding, and this is just surface level uh, guidance on how to charge because every business is different. Your overhead might be 10 times the labor, right? I don't know the business, but whatever that is, you always have to keep that three times ratio in mind. Okay, guys. So this one is key. And like I said, please follow, share, make a comment. Hopefully this helps somebody. And I'll be back for the next one.